Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to a new edition of Urban Sentinel Live. And yes, it's Tuesday evening, 8 o'clock, a little past 8, but we're here. We're going to have a good time tonight, chopping it up about uh, the current events that are taking place in this country. So I got all the way from Jacksonville, Florida, a good friend of mine, so Richard Cuff. He's a small businessman. He's the man down in Jacksonville, Florida, okay? You know, he's well involved in the community, and I saw some stuff he had posted on Facebook. I said, hey, look, we got to discuss that, because once you hear what we're talking about now, you're going to realize that the story is bigger and the picture is bigger than what we're seeing right now. And we really have to react to it. We really need to get ourselves together and wake up. Okay. So, Richard, where you at, my man? How you doing this evening?
Reggie, I'm doing quite well, man. I'm sitting here in my my bedroom / man cave, and it's the end of a really long day, but I'm excited about this conversation.
Right. So, let me see. Gosh, man, where can we start at? You know, just so much stuff happening right now. But let me get your thoughts on the situation with Biden real quick. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Well, I mean, if I can go just take right at the very surface, what everybody is talking about is whether or not Biden is the man for the Democratic Party. It doesn't matter. And the name of the game should be, if it was Mickey Mouse or the Michelin Man, whoever it was in the Democratic Party, it's the Democratic agenda.
Hey, Richie, you're fading out.
That's where the measurement should be, not Biden versus Trump. Because when we do Biden versus Trump, we are already looking at the curtain. As they say, never mind the man behind the curtain. When we're talking about Biden versus Trump, we're not even looking at the curtain, much less the man behind the curtain. So my take on it is, at this point, it doesn't, and at this point in the game, I should say, it doesn't matter whether it's Biden or anybody else for that matter. The question is, do you recognize that right now it's Republican agenda versus Democratic agenda?
Yeah, I mean, I tell you, for me, it's getting a little ridiculous out here. You know, with all the conversation going, you either for them or you're either against them. You know, and I think one of the things that's hurting the Democratic Party as a whole is that the party is kind of, I wouldn't say split 50-50, but you got some people in the party that want to see him just go away, and they don't realize that while they're playing these type of games, it's weakening the party, and it's going to make the other guys stronger when it comes to the election. You know, they need to just, regardless of how they feel, they just need to close their mouths and discuss this stuff in the back office somewhere, and not be so public with it. You know, it's making the party look like it's in a disarray.
Well, yeah, and if you, like you said, you follow my posts, I pretty much, when I'm talking politically, I am pretty much keeping my true to my platform, which is, I believe no party affiliation is what every voter should be. We don't track the history. So lately, that's what I've been posting, especially, and I guess we'll talk later about this Project 2025 thing.
Yeah.
But it's an extension to what I just mentioned. It's about knowing what the agenda is for that party. But we're focused on Democratic Republican Party, but we don't understand the history of the Democratic Republican Party. In fact, in 1821, or from 1801 to 1821, during that 20-year period, the party was called the Democratic Republican Party. They were one party. But they didn't come to power until the 1800s. You know, the Democratic Republican Party was still being formed as this nation was getting off the ground, and you had the industrialists against basically the people with the colonist mindset against who wanted to be free from the British, and then you had those who wanted to take the nation in the new direction. So you had two different thoughts of mine. One, let's break away from our past. The other one was let's step into our future. The Democratic Republican Party was about what does the future look like. The other parties, there was, I think, like the Whig Party. I don't remember the names of the party, but those parties were basically trying to make certain that we never have a king again, we never be ruled. We want freedom. That was why the revolution took place. But then came the Democratic Republican Party that was all about capitalism and capitalizing to go forward. Like, hey, we got this whole nation to ourselves now. Let's go forward. So you had the Republican capitalists, which were industrialists, the ones who wanted the factories. That's where the Rockefellers, the Eisenhowers, the Carnegies came from. And then you had the what's called the agrarian capitalists, the farmers in the South. The problem was, by the time slavery ended in 1808, the South had developed 20 years of a slavery, a slavery economy based on free labor. Now that was the problem. That's where the split started happening. And it makes sense when you look at what's going on today. So the Republicans in the North who had to pay for labor are on the same platform as the Democrats in the South who had free labor. Now you try to reconcile that. Like, hey, one of y'all, either you're going to have slavery in the North or you're going to have to be free in the South. Somebody's got to break. And so in 1821, they broke apart. Now, technically, Republicans will tell you, well, the Republican Party didn't get started until 1824, 3 years after the split. But they just put a new label on it. It still was split capitalism. They kept splitting and splitting, and what was the ultimate end? 1865 or 1864. Some 40 years later, they kept splitting and splitting and splitting until they went to war with each other. So basically, it was the Republicans and the Democrats that were at war, literally at war. And then because of the capitalists in the South with free labor, obviously the capitalists or the Democrats lost. But here's what happened, and this is what we have to talk about, Reggie. I will say, and I'll step out on a limb and say there was a time when America was great, and it was for 12 years, right in between 1865 and 1877, because this nation was trying to reconstruct itself. It had gotten rid of slavery. It took a war to do that. They passed the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment all in a 12-year period, dealing with the biggest problems that we had in this nation, which was slavery. But here's the problem. The Republicans and the Democrats who split like a bad divorce, they realized that neither one of them were going to get possession or custody, if you will, of the children, meaning the African Americans. None of them could now own that African American economy. African Americans were sending over 2,000 people were voted into office between 1865 and 2,000 black men. And they had senators and congressmen, 2,000 black men, over 2,000 between 1865 and 1877. And then the Republicans and the Democrats had a contested election similar to what Hillary Clinton and Trump went through. And the Trump won, and now who gets the presidency? So Samuel James Tilden won. Go look it up. Samuel James Tilden won in 1876, Democrat. He won the popular vote and he won the electoral vote. And then they were going to go to the Supreme Court and duke it out because they knew the Democrats suppressed the black vote. There's no way they could have won. In 1877, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party leaders met at the Wormley Hotel. And they made a decision. They said, look, we kept splitting and splitting and splitting. We've gone to war, and now these black people are rising up. If we keep it up, we're not going to have a nation. So in a secret meeting, the Democratic Party gave the presidency to the Republican Party. The Republican Party technically never won a vote. Technically, there was never a Supreme Court decision. There was literally a handshake between a group of white men in a secret meeting that gave the Republican Party the presidency in exchange for getting rid of Reconstruction, pulling the troops out of the South and creating what we have now. This nation that's run by just, I'll challenge anybody to go into the history books and tell me, when was there a time that there was any other party that was anywhere close to becoming president besides the Republican or the Democratic Party? They've been one since 1877. They tell us it's left wing, right wing. They allow the right, look at how is it that the right wing agenda goes forward and then the left wing comes up? But until Trump came in, and Trump doesn't know about the handshake and a smile agreement. Trump doesn't care about that, because our democracy could always be taken over by a faction that could control the government. And that's always been their fear, that we as African Americans would rise up and use democracy to our benefit. Democracy is just like a football on the field. Whoever gets it controls it. That can't happen if we, the people, are always in possession of that football. And so my bottom line is this: we're at a point right now where we, the people, are led like sheep, lied to from left wing and right wing. And the moment you ask the question, which one do you choose, Trump or Biden? It says you have already bought the cow for those. You traded your cow for 3 beans, because you're buying into that. There is no left wing, right wing. It's the same bird. There is no the left and the right. They're both the same. We black folk are the agenda that we need to come back to the table, just like we did from 1865 to 1877. But we can't do that when we believe the only choice that we have is to choose to be a Democrat or choose to be a Republican. I'm no party affiliated. I've been NPA for the 40 years that I've been able to vote. I'm NPA. Now, I do change my party in order to vote during the primaries because I want to have a voice. But after the primaries, like the rapper said years ago, I can't remember who said it, but he said, Calvin Klein ain't no friend of mine. I don't wear nobody's name on my behind. So I'm not trying to promote Democrat or Republican.
Right.
But we got, there's Reggie, there's layers to this. And I don't want to come on your show and just make it seem like it's just as simple as saying they both are the 2 wings of the same bird, because they've got strategies, right? And tactics, and they're playing chess while we're not even playing checkers, we're shooting marbles. So we've got to change the game.
Yeah, and we definitely do. It's definitely a group of men who would prefer not to see blacks in charge. Okay. And yes. I think the biggest fear that, white politicians have is that with the growing minority population, they're going to be a true minority, probably about 2050, and definitely going into the year 2100, they're going to be definitely a minority. So what they're trying to do now, they're trying to do everything in their powers to maintain that power, and they don't care how they do.
Absolutely.
And look, when Obama got in office, that just messed up everything. That messed up their plan. Okay, they never thought Obama would get in office. And Obama got in office for 2 terms. Them boys were mad because first thing McConnell said, my job is to make sure that this man doesn't get reelected in 4 years. Now, he ain't even got sworn in yet. They're talking about, my job is to make sure that this man doesn't get elected in 4 years.
And see, and everybody in this nation sat back and said, really? No, that's not your job. Your job is to come up to to Congress and represent the people from the district that sent you. That's what your job is. This idea that we gotta fight the left or stop the liberals, or even on the left saying we gotta stop the conservatives. We gotta stop Trump. Listen, democracy, I believe, is like a Lego blocks. right? And you can build whatever you want with it. But if you don't like what is constructed, you can break those blocks apart. They all fall on the ground, and then you can pick them back up and put them together again. Democracy is designed to break apart.
Mm-hmm.
That's the beautiful thing about democracy. The reason that's why you got to replace democracy with something else. You see, they're not trying to take over democracy. They're trying to replace democracy with something else, because democracy is designed to go through what it's going through.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at people say, well, oh my God, we're about to lose democracy. If we didn't lose democracy through 200 years of slavery and 90 years of Jim Crow, how many assassinations in the 60s, from Medgar Evers all the way to Martin Luther King,
Mm-hmm.
50s and the 60s. If we didn't lose our democracy during all of those assassinations and all of that stuff, we ain't gonna lose our democracy.
Mm-hmm.
What is happening is democracy gets in the way of them doing what they want to do, bring a fascist government or a dictatorship.
Mm-hmm.
You got to replace democracy. But the Bible says this: you can't bind up. You can't take over the house until you bind up the strong man.
Mm-hmm.
And the democracy is the house. That's what they're trying to take over. The strong man is the individual who understands that, well, until you get my one vote, if it breaks down to you got to get all the votes. You got to get all the votes. And this thing about manipulating it by just winning the election, they're doing that because they're slowly changing the law. They're changing the rules of the game. But I'm gonna say this, and I think maybe I don't want to. I don't want to hog up all your time. I don't know how much time you have here, but it's clear that what we've got to do is recognize that Trump would not be president if it were not for the fact that there are 5 different states, where in each one of those 5 swing states,
mm-hmm.
over 200,000 black people did not vote
mm-hmm.
because they bought into that right-wing propaganda that Hillary was crooked, lock her up. And we understand what happened. If somebody's talking about lock you up, you must really be, because in our mind, you got to be doing something serious to go to jail.
Right.
So we automatically saw Hillary as a crook, mm-hmm. because we were saying lock her up. And then black folks said, well, I ain't gonna vote for Trump, so I'm just not gonna vote. Mm-hmm. And in each one of those states where over 200,000 black folk did not vote, Trump won by less than 70,000 votes.
Yeah. The numbers were low.
Low turnout.
Yeah, they were low.
That's where they get us, man. They get us by clouding and clogging the airways with so much misinformation that the default for black folk is not to go and riot. They make us think it's riot. The default to black folks is to be passive. Mm-hmm. That's our default. That we would rather not be hit upside the head, or we would rather not have the fire hoses turn on us. If you don't want us in your building, we will keep walking and saying, I don't need to go there and eat anyway. I'll go to my side of town and eat. No, Mr. White Man, I'm not going to look you in your eye if it's going to mean I'm going to get lynched. That's why it was happening. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until we got pushed in the corner that we began to fight back. Now, I'm not saying that was a bad thing, or I'm not casting judgment on anybody. I don't want anybody coming at me and saying that I condone passivity. But what I'm saying to you is, when you give them no reason to strike, they have a hard time justifying why they are striking. And we were raised to give white folk no reason to strike. And so it's in our DNA to not, if we don't make a decision, don't move, hands up, don't move. If we just don't move, we'll stay alive. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened subliminally. When they started clogging our minds with all of this fight, 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 fight. What did we do? We say, some people say fight or flight. For Black folk, it's a double consciousness. It's fight or flight or stand still and hope to live. That's always the third. What do you tell your child? If the cop tell you don't move, keep your hand on the wheel, don't move. You see?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're doing.
And we got to get beyond that, because here it is, 2024, and we still fear the white population when it comes to standing up to our rights, because we're scared we're going to say something that's going to offend someone. And they say stuff that offends us as blacks all the time. So we need to start standing up. So, this can lead us into our segue, what we really need to be focused on, Project 2025. We've got to wake up in our communities and read through this, okay? I see a lot of people have broken it down and posted it on Facebook to make it easier for people to understand. But how many people are even stopping by those Facebook pages and clicking it on just to see what the bullet points are?
Yeah.
Okay?
Well, for me, is this: I downloaded the PDF.
Uh-huh.
I watched the news stories. There's a book out that kind of summarizes it. I bought that. My thing is I want to know everything about it. When I go online and I post, I'm not just haphazardly posting, and I'm not just trying to, troll somebody or attack at just come back at something. I am literally researching and pulling this information up, and there's so much. There's so much misinformation, but there's also missed information. And I think missed information is far more detrimental than misinformation. Misinformation eventually can be found out to be a lie, right? But say for instance, somebody says the house that you live in is actually theirs, right? You've been living in this house. Your mama left it for you. You got the house. Somebody comes up and creates it's pretty easy to trace the paperwork and find out that that's a lie, right? That's misinformation. But misinformation is you're living on the street homeless. Your grandfather died and left you 80 acres and a mansion, and nobody ever told you. You missed that. You see what misinformation does? Misinformation doesn't even raise a radar. At least when somebody's giving you some misinformation, it makes you want to go and verify it. But misinformation, it means you've never heard it, you didn't even know it. And that's where we are right now, is we're in the age of missed information. Why? Because we're being distracted. We're being distracted by twerking behinds on TikTok. We're being distracted by the beef between Drake and Kendrick Lamar. We're being distracted. And we while we're looking over here to the left, we're missing what's sailing by us on the right.
Right. Yeah.
Missed information. So what I try to do in my posts is go back and give you that information that you may have missed. And so I think one of the posts you were talking about, as I said, while you were researching 2025, also go and look up the Southern Manifesto, and you will see that they've been planning this for 70 years. And you go and look at the comments on it, and people are like, thank you for posting that. Why? They missed it. Nobody even knew that there was a Southern Manifesto that was written and signed by all of the represented Congress, out of the Congress in the South, all of them signed this Southern Manifesto that basically said we're going to make certain, number one, that we never segregate our public schools. Number two, that we give vouchers. The word vouchers, they were saying vouchers back in 1956. We're going to give vouchers to private schools so that it will cover the cost for them to go to the private school. And then what we'll do is defund the black public schools by lowering the taxes. And the savings from those lower taxes will be donated to private schools. And by the 60s, it was working until the Civil Rights Act passed. And Nixon was forced to tell these private schools, look, you cannot receive federal tax dollars and be discriminating at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And when the Supreme Court said absolutely, and you cannot get federal dollars and discriminate, that's when they turned the plan into what now we know as the Southern strategy.
Mm-hmm.
You had to come up with a strategy, and that's when Lee Atwater said you can't say nigga, nigga, nigga anymore.
Right.
So you got to use words like welfare queen and
Mm-hmm.
liberal elites and
Mm-hmm.
cut taxes. We know what all of that means. It means we are now attacking these black folk. And
Mm-hmm.
fast forward 50 years later, here we are today.
Mm-hmm. Then we realize, well, some of us realize that we've had quite a few racist presidents of this country, okay? In our time, we've had Lyndon Johnson. Well, all of them have been racist because the way they have gone into the back offices and talked about us, and as they pass away history, people come out and talk about it, talk about the history, I think one of the things that we got to realize that these guys never had the best interest of blacks here in America.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Lyndon Johnson went on ahead and signed the Civil Rights Act, but all he was trying to do, he was trying to keep this country in a neutral zone where it wouldn't be a lot of fighting, another civil war wouldn't start, okay?
Right.
And that's on the reason he did that, because he knew he had to do something. It was either going to be another civil war between the North and the South, or a civil war between whites and blacks. So he had to do something to, to quiet everything down. Now, even when he went and did what he did, we still were having problems. I came up in a small town in North Carolina, and we still couldn't go in a little hot dog. And I never went in there, and not even to the day when it changed over to another business. We couldn't even go into the little deli and sit down at the front and grab a hot dog. We had to go to the back.
Right.
And this was after that and this was up into the 70s, okay? Come on now. This was up into the 70s. They go, we gave y'all your civil rights. No, yeah, you guys gave it to us on paper, but you still were dogging us out every chance you got.
You mentioned earlier Barack Obama, and the thing that I realized, and people, you got to go and look at it. Our economy collapsed 2 months before Obama took office.
Mm-hmm.
It was under Bush that the economy collapsed. But, my theory, I believe, is that they saw Obama coming and they feared the worst. That you ever see that little thing? There's somebody, it used to be like a cigarette inside of a glass tube.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, break glass in case of emergency. Basically, pull this out and start smoking it. Like, in case of emergency, break the glass. Well, Wall Street had this thing that's like, if we ever get taken over, where they're going to get control of the whole economic system, pull this lever, pull it, and it'll wipe out everything, and they'll have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And those jokers did that, and they flushed the economy. And then Obama got into office, and the moves that he started making, first to repair Wall Street, like, whoa, wait a minute, this dude kind of looked, it ain't as bad as we thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
And then next thing you know, by 2020, by 2010, 2009, actually, the economy was beginning to turn around, and it went on a straight up trajectory from 2009 all the way until COVID, pretty much, and Trump. Trump spent 4 years taking credit of the last 4 years of Obama.
Right. And he always does that. Takes everybody's credit. But see, the thing about it, those guys didn't realize, Bush and his little cronies and the guys on Wall Street didn't realize how smart Obama was. Obama wasn't going to come in there and bring all his homeboys that stand on the corner to be part of the cabinet, okay?
Right.
He surrounded himself with knowledgeable people that knew how to work the system, and that's what they did. So that's why when Bush did what he did, allowing the economy to collapse, it didn't stick, because Obama didn't try to do it by himself. Hey, I'm the president. I'm going to surround myself with people that understand economics and understand other entities of the government, and that's how we're going to make it work, okay? And you're right. Then Trump comes in, and he just destroys it, because he didn't like, the problem with Trump was he didn't like Obama, okay? Yeah. So he didn't want nothing. He wanted to destroy Obama's legacy, okay? So what he did, everything Obama did, if Obama went left on something, Trump went right on. Okay, yeah. And that's how he brought the government down.
Well, let me tell you, I said this before, and I'll say now the way I should have framed it was never mind the man behind the curtain. That phrase from the Wizard of Oz, never mind the man behind the curtain. It doesn't matter that we are ignoring the curtain, which is where it is. Mm-hmm. That benefits those who are behind the curtain. Mm-hmm. But when you know there's a curtain and you pull the curtain back, first of all, becoming conscious that you are unconscious of the fact that there's a curtain. Wake up. Number one is wake up. Waking up is the first step. Mm-hmm. That's in my coaching. I say the PS factor is your level of conscious awareness of your God-given ability to attract a successful outcome in any given situation. So if we apply this to just politics, so let's just say PS1, you're unconscious becoming conscious. That's physical. That means you're not aware that there is even a curtain. Mm-hmm. PS2 is mental. You wake up and your mind goes, oh, there's something there. There is a curtain. PS3, you're emotional. Mm-hmm. Now you're saying, I can do something. Let me open the curtain. And when you pull back the curtain, it's not until you pull back the curtain that you get to PS4, what's spiritual. You start seeing the spiritual world. And here's what happens. When you finally see the spirit world, a lot of times, you want to close that curtain back because Lord Jesus is not what I expected to see, or it overwhelms you, or it blows a fuse, or like the phrase where people say I'm just filthy rags, or the perfect example is the guy who wrote Amazing Grace. That line, he says, "What an amazing grace this is to save a wretch like me." I don't sing the song. I never would say that word because that's not my song. That's his song. That's a white man who had slaves, who was on a slave ship when he wrote Amazing Grace, because the storm didn't gobble that ship up like he thought it would. And the slaves were underneath singing, humming the tune to Amazing Grace when he wrote that poem. That's where the song came from. To save a wretch like me. When you pull that curtain back and you realize, wait a second, it's not about who's behind the curtain. You pull that curtain back and you realize, wait a minute, it's been me that's behind the curtain. It's me that I should focus on. Mm-hmm. So what I'm saying in this regard, we as African Americans need to think, okay, we've been behind the curtain long enough. Let's step out from behind the curtain and focus on ourselves. What's the number one thing I think we can do? And this, I'm taking a page from Dr. Claude Anderson, where I say there's three things we should focus on. Mm-hmm. The first thing is group economics. Can we begin to pool our money together? African Americans at this very moment have over $2 trillion of spending power. And between now and 20 years from now, 2044, over $64 trillion will change hands from the baby boomer generation to the next generation. Mm-hmm. 64 on the low end, 64 trillion, high end, 80 trillion. Mm-hmm. So where are we with group economics to capitalize on that? We need to put together a group economics think tank. Number two is political alliances. We need to form city by city, neighborhood by neighborhood. We need to have political thinkers that connect all of these neighborhoods, and then we come together in one annual conference somewhere. And then number three is generational wealth. Mm-hmm. And not only generational wealth in the way that white folk have experienced it, meaning grandma leaves something for your grandchild and that generational wealth keeps rolling over, but generational wealth as in having a mechanism that generates wealth. We don't have generational wealth mechanisms. We don't have things that throughout our community, they generate wealth, factories or inventions or duplicatable systems. We're just now getting into that, but hey, making six figures on on a Instagram page is nothing really to brag about when you're talking about $2 trillion that's left on the table. So until we take our focus off the curtain and the man behind the curtain and put our focus on the future, we are all going to be stuck where we are, basically in a circular firing squad with always with somebody to blame about where we are. But I'm telling you, if we focus on those three things: group economics, generational wealth, and political alliances, we can move ourselves 20 years in the future in the blink of an eye.
Hey, Richard, I just walked the producer. I just came to my other location and everything. But I had a quick question for you based on a conversation I was having with a young lady, and she's actually hoping to do it down here in Durham, North Carolina, where I'm located at and everything. Where have we gone wrong in your mind? Because I remember a day when a lot of our organizations and professional organizations used to work in alliance together, and they would even know each other. Because one of the things that this new, relatively new friend of mine is talking about is how she would like to get the organizations here in Durham that are Black professional organizations and even Black social groups, because like we got a horse club and a motorcycle club, to actually know each other. Because a lot of times, at least here, and I imagine it's the same in your city, and I know it's the same where um, definitely Reginald is located. We've got, like, the Black firefighters, you got the Black policemen, you got the Black journalists, and a lot of times they don't even know or communicate with each other. And I think that is a disservice. But I just wanted your take on that and how we can get more of that going on, because that was something that Dr. King and others encouraged. But it seems like we've gotten away from that knowledge that you just talked about of group economics, but also even alliances within our own community. I just wanted your take on that.
No, where we missed it is we did not embrace technology as a part of our culture. See, what happened was computers. You see the movie Hidden Figures, right? And they literally called the women computers.
Mhm.
So our Black women were doing these high-level calculations. What does the white man come along? He comes along and figures out a way to mechanize it. Throw technology in it. Suddenly you got a computer that can do what a room full of Black women are doing. Right. So what do the Black women do? The Black women say, well, we need to learn how to operate the white man's computer. You see that? The Black women didn't say, we need to get together and build our own. We're computers. We ought to be able to build our own computers. No, that story when what's her name? I can't remember her name. She played the manager of the women. She goes to the white library and steals the book on how to run the IBM machine so that she can learn it. That's where we went wrong. When we started coming out of the civil rights movement and moving into what would have been the Black middle class, we began to study white people's systems. And we didn't develop our own systems. The NAACP wasn't at the head of creating a new website or a new technology. They didn't put together a brain trust or any of those things. So we missed that window of opportunity. Look at Facebook. How did Facebook come about? Facebook came about because Mark Zuckerberg was a student at Harvard University. And he created a way for people at Harvard to communicate with each other. Right. Same thing the African Americans did with their societies. We communicated with each other, but we didn't use technology to do it. You see what happened? They used technology, create a way for everybody at Harvard to connect, and then they created a way for every other Ivy League school to connect the same way Harvard connected. Next thing you know, where are Black folk at? The best we can do now is have a page on Facebook. Where's our
Facebook? And then we tried to create Black Planet and some of the other ones that then got bought out by others. But along that same line, Richard, because I was reading another article that was quite interesting, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about this, is some of our own people, and I've brought this up on Reggie's show before, were part of the sellout, because urban renewal hit a lot of our cities. It hit Durham, it hit a number of other places, and it was a concentrated effort to destroy our communities and all along those lines. And unfortunately, some of our own people, because I know that there was a organization here that actually bought into the notion of the empty promises and what urban renewal promised, thinking that they were going to get something, and some of them may have gotten a little bit of gravy, but not as much gravy as they were probably promised. But I just wanted your take on that, because urban renewal has hit, I don't care whether it's Chicago, LA, definitely Durham, North Carolina, Atlanta. It hit a number of places where they got the highways to go through a lot of the neighborhoods. A lot of them were our neighborhoods, but there were also a lot of poor neighborhoods as well. But that was done intentionally, from my understanding of it. But I just wanted your take as a scholar,
No,
because it seems like they
you're
had some
you're
people that were selling out our community from within our community.
you're absolutely right. But it goes back to the same thing that I was saying. The same way that we did not embrace technology as we were moving out of our segregated communities. We didn't embrace technology the way the white community was able to embrace it and invent it and use it to move a giant leap forward. We didn't build infrastructure.
Right.
They built our infrastructure. We didn't. So we were waiting for them to determine where the roads would go through our community. We didn't present a plan to them to say, hey, this is where we want this road to go. We stood by and watched them come through with bulldozers.
Mm-hmm.
And then after they came through with bulldozers, they were able to put the exits where they wanted to put. We didn't even have an input on where to put the exits. They put the exits where they wanted to put them. They spread them out as far as they wanted to spread them out. But even after they did that, they went on their side and created what we call here social infrastructure. Well, if you look it up, you'll understand that social infrastructures are the libraries, the museums, the walking paths, the tennis courts, all of those things are social infrastructure. But you look over on our community. When I was a kid, I remember when they built took the parking lot between two of the apartment buildings that was asphalt, and they took half the parking lot and turned it into 2 basketball courts. And they went, there you go, Negroes, there's your infrastructure. And that was it. And so every now and then you find a Venus Williams and Serena who figured out a way to come out without infrastructure, or Tiger Woods without infrastructure.
Richard, along those same lines with the infrastructure, how about some of the infrastructure that they created for us and put us in infrastructures that they created for us? Because isn't that really what the projects are? I don't care if it's in the projects in Nashville, the projects in Louisville, the projects in Indiana. They actually built those buildings and then told us that this is where we're going to live after they destroyed the homes and the businesses that we had already had. But they're like, now y'all going to live over there in the quote unquote projects.
Yeah, well, now you're getting into the next layer, because in much the same way that I was talking about in my coaching, the PS factor, from physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, it works the same way as you start moving up to the big government level. Now what you're talking about is the same thing that was happening maybe on a there's things that we do to ourselves personally, right? We shoot each other, we rob from each other. That's on the personal level. The next level up is what's being done on an institutional level, like certain restaurants treat you this way and that kind of thing. Then we move up to those things that are done on a government level. Right. And so now what you're talking about is this government, oppression, and these governmental systems. And that was, they would create the projects. So you look up the Cabrini Greens. I think it was up in Chicago where Cabrini Green is. Yeah. And New York, where they have like these massive tall projects. Like, let's just take all the black folk, because black folk were moving up north to get those jobs. And so while they were giving white folk homestead exemption and GI Bill money to build houses out in the suburbs, they were building housing for black folk to stay in these projects. And then at the same time, though, they were building that with government money. Right. And this is what happened. Rather than us again saying, look, government, why don't you give us the money to build our own houses? We had state representatives that could have done that. We were giving these contracts to white contractors to come and pour the concrete, build the buildings, and we're done. Then after those buildings were done, and these contractors realized, wait a minute, these black folk are about to start getting housing, because they realized these tall buildings weren't working. They were literally about to start building government single family housing. And then Reagan comes along and says, you know what, we're going to get out of the business of building housing. What we're going to do is just put it up for bid, so that now we're going to incorporate, HUD housing into these new apartment complexes. So anytime you drive by and see a new apartment complex, I guarantee you there's some federal money that they got, that there's, out of those 200 apartments, there's supposed to be like 20 or 30 that are government HUD houses. But those jokers have even lobbied Congress that say they don't have to advertise that they receive this HUD money. And your HUD, you don't even, these single mothers are driving past these beautiful apartment complexes and don't know that they can use their HUD voucher at that apartment complex. Because when they roll up in there and say, do you have any HUD apartments? They'll go, no. And they walk out, and then a white woman walks in there with the same voucher and asks the same question. They say, sure, let me go show you an apartment. Yep. That's the governmental level. So yes, we got work to do. But that's why I'm saying we can't be spending a whole bunch of time on who's behind the curtain or who's pulling the string or who's the puppet master. And I don't need to hear anything about who's conspiracy what. What I know is this, is we've got $2.1 or to $2.6 trillion of spending power. And we've got a 20-year window where $64 trillion is literally up for grabs. Wow. And I'd love to talk with that person that you were talking about there. You said in North Carolina? Uh-huh. Yeah, I would love to talk with that. I'll get with you, Reggie. We'll
connect and everything. I did have a quick question speaking of North Carolina, and then I'll let Reggie close y'all out and everything. But I was just wondering your thoughts, because here in North Carolina, we also, and I mentioned him because it's part of the urban renewal, but we got modern day Uncle Tom's as well, because that's really what I consider Mark Robinson, the guy that's running for lieutenant governor, and is also the one that said that women are at fault because they don't know how to keep their skirt down, and he even said that that there are folks out there that deserve killing, and a bunch of other asinine things in my mind that he has said and everything. But I just wanted your take. And I mean, he's one. Tim Scott in South Carolina is there are a number of other folks and everything, and even some of the things that seem progressive by some of our progressive people also don't make any sense, because I was on another one of our shows here on Pod TV, I was hearing that in Baltimore, they want to give these $1,000 baby vouchers. I don't have any kids of my own. I do have nephews, and I know $1,000 ain't going to hardly go nowhere for a baby voucher and everything. I mean, what you going to do with $1,000? By the time you buy a formula and you buy a couple of things, you don't already spent that $1,000. So that doesn't sound like a reasonable amount to me and everything. But I just wanted your take, one, on some of these lowball figures, and also some of our Uncle Toms that are out there, because there are definitely some, whether it's Tim Scott or Mark Robinson.
Well, number one, I wouldn't dare insult Uncle Tom's cabin by putting Tim Scott's name. Uncle Tom was literally a hero that outsmarted a white man, but they changed it. By the time the book got to the South, they turned him into this caricature so that the story wouldn't resonate. But my point is that if we can come back later and talk about what we have to do. If you want to see like something tremendous take over, go into the look.
I think Richard froze.
He was definitely knowledge, and he froze.
Yeah. Hopefully he'll be back. Let's give him some time. But I mean, he's brought up some good points tonight. Yeah. We got a lot of work to do in the community and to move ourselves ahead, because when you look at, we are pawns, the black community, we are pawns. I mean, it's like Biden, he like he said, he can depend on the black folks, Can
you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hold on. Mm-hmm. My phone dropped out, and okay. What about now? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, if you guys can hear me, I'm gonna continue. The point that I was making is that even though these guys they're throwing out these literally the token amounts, $1,000 here, in order to get the conversation away from what would really work, and that number one is baby bonds. We could change in a generation the wealth of everybody in this country simply by issuing a baby bond based on the current level of poverty that child is in. So let's say the baby is born in a family that's, dirt poor. Well, that child would get a $50,000 baby bond, and it would get invested so that by the time that child is 20 years old and it's untouched, that baby bond may be $200,000, something like that. That's more than enough for a house, a business, or whatever the case is. A wealthy baby, somebody like born to Jennifer Lopez, might only get a baby bond of $5,000. Right. Then what happens is every year based on where you want that child to go, you add to that bond. If you got a parent, if a parent's worth $1 million, $1 billion, you should be having money put aside for your baby anyway. But see, by the time they get 21 years old, the playing field is equal for all of them. Baby bonds can be done like right away for far less. For what we sent to Israel and Ukraine, we could have given $50,000 baby bonds to every baby born from the time the Russians first attacked. We could have done that, and it still would have been less. And I'm certain that those numbers add up that way. 50,000 to every baby. But the second thing after the baby bonds is the monthly vouchers. Not $1,000. No, that's not going to get it. But we did it during COVID, where we gave tax credits. We took the money that these parents would used to have to wait till April 15th to file to get $3,000, $5,000 per child, and they broke it up in monthly payments. And that pulled nearly half the children that were in poverty, pulled them out of poverty just by doing that. And it still didn't cost the government an arm and a leg. Yes, it had cost, but the payoff in the future with not having health issues and not being crime ridden and all these other things, those pay off in the future. And so we've got to get away from these step and fetch it kind of politicians who trying to dance up Trump's behind. So like whatever they're trying to do. But what we need to do is make certain that we send policymakers to Washington, those that are going to talk about writing laws and introducing policy that's going to impact us. And forgive me, guys, that I lost my sound on this end. I'm going to drop my camera off and try to get back to you, but that's my thoughts.
Okay. Well, look, let's continue this conversation on again next week. Richard, you busy next Tuesday night? We lost. Okay, I'll probably have to just come back up on him. But I think this conversation is good enough today. We got to do a part 2 to it, so we can continue to dig into Project 2025. Now, like I was saying earlier, we've got a lot of work to do because we're not paying attention to what's going on out here, especially most of us in the Black community. You know, if you really dig into this Project 2025, and I'm hoping that through all the turmoil that we're having, we won't have to adjust to Project 2025, that it'll be something that get thrown in the trash can. We can keep moving. But, you know, it looks like, you know, we might have to. So that's why, you know, I was saying earlier, Richard, if you're not busy next Tuesday night, we need to sit down and continue this conversation next Tuesday night. If you're not busy next Tuesday night.
No, listen, we can literally do a series, because I really believe that we've got to have a conversation about this every week, week in, week out. But not only that, use the podcast platforms. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned earlier that there's other podcasts that you all participate in. Mm-hmm. We've got to start weaving together this network of everybody that's out there independently, mm-hmm. and start talking the same voice. Yeah. When my wife passed away, I don't know, Reggie, if I talked to you since Miriam passed away. I think
we've talked a couple times.
Yeah, a couple times. Okay, yeah. Forgive me. It's been a haze these last 3 years. August 15th will be 3 years since she passed away. Mm-hmm. But we were quite well invested in our community. We funded the only music program that teaches 3- and 4-year-olds to play violin in preschool. And my daughter started playing violin. She would walk around the house pretending to play the violin at 2 years old. She's now 27. So for 25 years, she's had violin under her neck. She's now working on her PhD in violin performance. My son followed her path, but he did not want to go to college majoring in music. So he switched after a tired school. All his public school was music. When he graduated college, we thought he was going into music just like my daughter. He decided to do computer science. 5 years later, he's got his computer degree. Now he's been working at Microsoft for 2 years. Oh, wow. See, we can create opportunities for our children. And I'm not saying forget about the past, but I'm saying we don't need to be putting any energy into the past. There's nothing that the past will return. By me giving thought to, in fact, the Bible tells us give no thought for tomorrow. You know, So basically, where should we be putting our energy? We should be putting our energy in this moment called now. And if we can build up the energy called now, we can build up something that can reverberate for years and decades into the future. So I will do this. I'll pledge to make myself available that we can talk as much as you guys want to have the conversation. And then I want to take it a step further and build out some action plans around it where maybe we can have some conversations, because I think you guys are in different cities, correct?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So if we can talk, and Reggie, you and I talked about how we can take Urban Sentinel and become the official voice of our business alliance. So again, a good friend of mine, he played great. You guys know him as Grady on Sanford and Son, Whitman Mayo. I brought him to Miami to speak, and I was in my late 20s, 28 years old. And he asked my friend who was in the limo with me, he asked her, what does she want to do? And she said she always wanted her own television talk show. He asked me, what do you want to do? I said, well, I'm really good at background stuff, like putting together your visit here. And a manager who was in the Army, he says, well, you should be a producer. And then he said this, why don't you produce her show? And we gave him these excuses. We Miami had was on its way to its third riot in the 80s. Miami's racist, blah, blah, blah. They won't let you do this. They. And Whitman stopped us. And he said, who is this they? And where does they live? And then he said the words that blew every fuse in my little 28-year-old mind. He said, listen, no revolution has ever begun with the masses. It's always 2 or 3 people who get together and decide to change things. So I don't know about y'all, but that's been ringing around in my head for almost 40 years. I know that I don't be. Bishop McLaughlin here at the Potter's House, he said this way, give me 2 or 3 people ready to storm the gates of hell with a water pistol. That's all I need. So let's go and do something, man. I really I appreciate you all making this platform available, and definitely
yeah, because I want to get the word out. When November the 5th comes, or the 4th, whatever day it is, and it's all done and said, I want to say, well, I did what I could. Okay.
Yeah.
Made sure that I got the word out there. Whether or not they listen, hey, I don't know, but at least the word was put out there.
Tried to get the word out and everything. And to your point, and even Richard's point and everything, I remember that Dr. King actually did one of his famous speeches at one of the churches. It's not the church that I'm associated with, because the Hayti Heritage Center is associated with St. Joseph AME, but White Rock is where he did the fill up the jail speech, and that was after the Greensboro riots, which is kind of your notion of just letting the people come to the masses and make their voice be heard, because that's definitely what Dr. King did in Durham. And so he did that speech after he had learned from, I think it was one of the famous other ministers. It was one of his mentors and everything. So he did that speech and definitely had that notion of filling up the jails. And I can definitely relate to hearing those historical figures, because before he passed away, I had the pleasure of hearing, this was probably almost 2 or 3 decades ago, Dick Gregory. And Dick Gregory was also a lot about revolution and developing some serious knowledge before he passed away. So he wasn't just a funny man, but he was also one that was talking about everything from his diet to the way that we let our food be processed, to a number of other important issues. So like I said, he came to the center and I heard him give some very powerful words. So he was definitely a activist and not just a entertainer.
Well, listen, I'm getting back on the road. I'm probably going to take some tips from Dick Gregory. I've been doing stand-up comedy for probably 30, 40, 35 years more now. And when I got married, I decided to stop the road because I really wanted to build a family. Then once Mary passed away, I got back into comedy. So Tuesday night, I'm doing the podcast. Wednesday night, I'm doing stand-up, open mic night at the Comedy Club. So my week is kind of lining up with that.
Okay. Sounds good. And just very quickly, Liberty Twitch, I saw your comment. Yes, we have forgotten what Dr. King said. And a lot of kids don't even know who Dr. King was. So we got to get reestablished a way to teach Black history in our community. Since the schools, especially down in Florida, You know, especially that governor you got down in Florida wants to whitewash Black history. Okay, he wants to
This,
wipe it out.
let me tell you something really idiotic that he
Mm-hmm.
did. And by the way, I'm gonna say this real quick before I talk about DeSantis. But if we would be totally in a different place. Remember, Dr. Martin Luther King, everything that he said after the first 3 minutes, he was improvising. He was riffing because Mahalia Jackson egged him on to do an old sermon that he had done that she had heard several times. And you listen to Martin Luther King, he starts off with like, I'm tired of talking about he started off that way. But by the time he got into it, he was like improvising. And then I think that if he had scripted this in one place, he said, I have a dream that one day my children will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, right? And when he said that, to this day, people still make it seem as if we're trying to get over this skin color thing. But if Martin Luther King had said these words, we have a totally different conversation. They say, I have a dream that one day my children will not be judged by the money they can raise when they run for office, or by the wealth that their great grandparents left them that they can live on today. Not only will they not be judged by that, but they will be judged by the content of their character. But see, that speech was supposed to be about money, about coming to get out of poor people. And with that one little thing, he turned it back into about race. But that wasn't why that thing was there. It was about us stepping into our economic power. And I think that that's what it's time to do right now. It's time to step into that economic power.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense and everything. And I see that he's saying that it's really not about what's happening now at Liberty Twitter. He's saying it's based on color now, not character. And one of the things that I would argue with the Liberty Twitter and everything is I sometimes get frustrated, and I just recently hit my 62nd birthday, but I think about the things that Dr. King was fighting against. And unfortunately, a lot of those things are battles that have not been won. I think about a dream deferred and things along those lines, because I think about Dr. King. He talked about not wanting to go that much to war, and we're still dealing with the war issues with, like you mentioned earlier, Ukraine and Israel. He also talked about the homelessness issue, which we're still dealing with. He talked about the way that we treat our veterans. He talked about a number of those things, and that was almost, like I said, some 50 years ago. And unfortunately, the issues that he was bringing up and even some of the solutions are still part of the dialogue. And I'm glad that you're trying to come up with solution-based ideas in order to get us to the next level, because that's one of the things I even think about that book from Chaos and Community, and a lot of things that were in that book are still relevant, even the whole wage gap issues, because they were talking about with the sanitation workers, but we can replace the sanitation workers with the fast food workers, and it's still the same conversation. So a lot of that is still relevant to what's going on now. So that can be very frustrating sometimes.
Well, listen, I appreciate even that you guys want to give one more week to the conversation, but honestly, I was ready to launch my own podcast just to talk about this particular conversation, this particular issue. And literally, I get the invitation to come onto the show. I'm loving this real agents being pushed because of their higher academic achievement. We see agents. You guys, there's some great comments that are coming through here. I love the participation that you all have on the show. I am thinking that you with your magazine, the news network is the perfect foundation to begin to talk about maybe creating an annual conference or something that we can do. That begins to move the needle, because
we got to do something, because the young folks aren't doing anything now. I mean, it's just a whole lot taking place in this country now that young people are oblivious to. They seem that they have no desire to deal with it.
Well, and I get where they are. Again, remember what I said earlier, that it's in their DNA to be non-violent, to be not passive. It's just that's how we were able to be put into slavery, because we're not a warring faction people. We are literally God walking on this earth. Y'all know that verse. Let us love one another, for God is love. And so we embody love. That's who we really are. And we do our best when we're able to love and show love. But you get hatred that comes from people like the Saracens. You mentioned them earlier, because let me show you what this is not good. I'm sorry. I'm like, I didn't say that out loud. I thought he was going to say something even worse, but the word nut came out. I'm trying to hold it back. The nut came out. But anyway, this dude is so trying to run for president 4 years from now, but he still wants to show right-wing manifest how racist he can be, or how, idiotic he can be. We had in the state budget, multi-billion dollar budget, a line item, which they gave the government line item deal, so you can just strike out anything you want from the budget. $32 million was allocated to cultural arts. That's our museums, our symphonies, our libraries, all anything that relates to culture. We could apply these funds, and they would give it out in grants, $50,000, $30,000. But these organizations use that money. Some of them get more. Don't you know that this man vetoed that entire $32 million budget? Nobody gets the money. Why? So it wouldn't be clear that it was racist. But it comes out that the reason he did that was because two great gay groups want to read books to children. Two groups that might get $500 or maybe $5,000 out of $32 million. He shut down the entire budget just to make a point. If our young people need to understand anything about the reason to vote, that would be it. Right.
Yeah, we got to go out and vote. Well, look, Richard, we're going to have to close out for the night, but we're going to get back together next Tuesday night for our viewers. This has been the Urban Sentinel live show with my guest tonight, Richard Guff. He's the man in charge in Jacksonville, Florida. And he's got a lot of great ideas on how to move the Black community along with any other people from any other ethnic group that wants to come along with us, okay? We just got to do better in this country for all people. We got to start somewhere. So also I want to remind everybody the new edition of Urban Sentinel magazine is out. We're featuring this month Gene Groove Allen, who was a part of the House Party movie, the first one. He was a guy doing a dancing with a suit on. He's actually doesn't live far from where I live, and I was able to run into him. And we got him on the cover, and we got some other great stories in the magazine for our July-August edition. So look, guys, come back next Tuesday night. Rich and I are going to be back here again next Tuesday night at 8 o'clock. We're going to sit down, and we're going to continue our discussion because the next couple of months are very crucial, and whatever happens after the first Tuesday in November is really going to affect the direction this country is going into.
Absolutely.
So we got to get it ready. We got to talk about it. So, Richard, have a good rest of the week. Enjoy yourself tomorrow night at the Comedy Club.
Yes,
Thanks
sir.
for hanging out with me tonight, and we'll talk maybe before then.
Yeah.
We'll definitely be back on next Tuesday night at 8 o'clock on the Urban Sentinel Live Show. Take care, everyone.
Looking forward to it. Peace, guys.
Okay.